Doubts in yesterday's sessions in NumPy, then related to scikit-learn's linear regression. Are there any doubts? There are no doubts. I'll proceed. Nobody had a chance to go through the yesterday's this one codes, linear regression, NumPy, and anybody tried the assignment, NumPy assignment notebook? So no response. Coordinators, any messages in the chat box?
No, sir.
Okay. So today we will continue from where we left yesterday. So primarily we said that there are other techniques where if there are power raised to 10, 11 and other stuff, many of the coefficients actually do not have significant values. So we need to remove that and then make the model simpler while still retaining the accuracy of the model. In this context, there are already algorithms and methods which will enable us to do it. These are basically statistical methods developed this ridge regression, lasso, and other stuff primarily in Stanford University and elsewhere, NYU and such places. So we are going to talk about that methods here. So this is ridge regression. Uh, Basically, when the model order is high, so what happens is that you saw yesterday in the bias variance trade-off, I think there is some small echo happening. Somebody has to mute, I suppose. Okay. So what happens when we have higher model order? You saw that it's the thing. It's trying to overfit the data. Since it tries to overfit, so what really happens is that it becomes even though training error comes down, test error becomes high. So that is the problem of high variance. So that is the reason that we have to sort of constrain the model, and the better method to do that is the ridge regression. They are also known as shrinkage methods. There are two methods: the ridge regression and lasso. They are related to L2 norm and L1 norm, which you might have already learned from mathematical foundations sessions. So that's the utility of those learning that those mathematical terms. Actually, you see it practically applied here. So we have the cost function. So it's a multiple linear regression or polynomial regression cost function with coefficients alpha naught through alpha m. It's defined as summation of fx minus y the whole square. Okay, and of course you have 1 by n and other stuff. To that, we are going to add one more term. So this term is known as the penalty term. So if you look at a penalty term, this is a summation of alpha j square. Okay. So what is being done is that the same alphas, whatever it is we are using, we are identifying at each step of the gradient descent. So we are going to take those alphas, square it. So when we do this one, and then we are going to multiply by some parameter called beta. So this parameter is whatever name you can give. So, but I have named it here as beta. So this is known as a regularization parameter. So what happens is that so if alpha value is high, then the cost is going to be high. Our objective is to minimize the cost. So when we put this beta term, it is sort of going to shrink those particular coefficients which have too high a value and resulting in higher cost function. That is the actual mathematical essence of what ridge regression is doing. It is penalizing coefficient terms which are contributing to higher cost. Okay, so that's what this is doing in the ridge regression. So what happens here? So suppose beta is equal to 0, then this entire term does not exist. Okay, so this term is not there, and you are only left with this. This is the normal thing which you already saw in the least squares, ordinary least squares thing which was used in linear regression. But if so, this is very beta is equal to 0. This leads to high variance, so you want to reduce it. So we start uh, giving higher values to it, say 0.1, 1, 2, and all. So you'll understand it's again dependent on the problem. So you'll understand from the problem what is a reasonable beta. So you start to raise it, but then what happens if you make it very high? If you penalize too much, what is going to happen? So it is going to reduce the coefficient so much that you enter into the left side of the that curve which you saw, which means it will create high bias problem. So from high variance you are moving into high bias problem. So it's also through iterations is what you actually find what is the right beta. So this is also known as, see, I mean, every algorithm has got certain tunable parameters. So for ridge regression, beta or the regularization parameter is a tuning parameter. So you have to remember that. Typically, cross validation and other techniques are used to sort of tune these parameters. Okay. Mm, anything else is there here? Yeah. So another technique is known as lasso. It's very similar. You still have the same fx minus y the whole square, which is the ordinary least squares. Again, you have the beta term, summation term, but instead of alpha square, you just have the modulus of alpha here. So this has interesting feature in the sense that while the ridge regression, which is alpha j square, will not reduce. I mean, it will reduce the value of the coefficients towards zero, but it will not make it exactly zero. What is the problem? So if you have 81 parameters that you saw in superconductor experiment, and you have multiple say powers of it, so you have so many I mean hundreds of coefficients which are there. Even though ridge regression reduces the significance of the sum of the coefficients, it will not make them zero. So you can't throw off the variables. So in order to understand or interpret the model, it is very complex. So that is why they came up with this lasso technique in Stanford University, where they use the modulo function, and this has an effect that whatever terms it has to penalize, it will exactly drive it to zero, so that you can just throw off those additional terms. Your model becomes simpler, your interpretation becomes easier. That is what is known as the lasso. So one of them is the L2 norm. So and this another is the L1 norm. So the penalty is primarily using L2 norms and L1 norms with the regularization parameter. So with this understanding, I think we can move ahead with the same example that we took yesterday, superconductor example. You should see um, I don't know. So okay, so probably linear regression we had the superconductor. So you can still open your part two of whichever collab file that we were looking yesterday in the afternoon session. So you can look at it. We did all this stuff. We did the PCA. We got this problem and all. So yeah, I mean, so if you look at this one, uh, so if when you're using too many 10th order, 11th order, and so much of weightage you're giving, so this is where the problem is. So you want to shrink it. So how you are doing, you are taking each polynomial, and with respect to each polynomial degree, you are trying to assess this. So this is a sort of a manual task that you are doing. I mean, you are running a loop, that's fine, but still You don't know what is the right polynomial order. You run through across all the polynomial order and you identify a threshold point, and then you say that this is the most optimal parameter. But what we are going to do now with ridge regression and lasso is that we don't have to worry about any of these things. You can give 10th order, 11th order, 12th order, whatever highest order that you want to choose. You just blindly give it. You don't run it for each polynomial degree, but simply add penalty term, the ridge regression penalty or the lasso penalty. And the only thing you have to do is you have to work with the beta. So the tuning parameter, you have to work with that. So if you work with that tunable parameter, you are automatically ensured that your test error is reduced. Even though you have given the polynomial degree of 10, you don't have to worry about it. It's going to sort of constrain the model and give you the right sort of fit to your model. So what in the same scikit-learn, so you have the linear model import ridge. So the ridge regression is through called through this function called ridge. So here, okay, whatever I talked about alpha beta there, which is the tunable parameter, so it is more conventionally known as alpha. So that what regularization parameter alpha, you can vary. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to vary that parameter from -3 to 6. So this is something you don't know beforehand. So you will have to try different levels of this regularization parameter and then see what fits well. So the same thing, you're still doing PCA, so which means the 81 parameters are shrunk to 3 parameters, and you don't give different number of degrees like earlier in a for loop. You just choose one highest degree that is there, just the 11, and then call the ridge function and store it in the ridge regression sort of variable. Then you call a pipeline with scaling, PCA, polynomial features, and the ridge regression. So first it does the scaling, then it reduces the number of dimensions from 81 to 3, then it increases the uh, degree of, or it creates a 11th degree polynomial model, and on top of it, it will apply ridge regression with the value alpha, the regularization parameter. It's going to fit it, train, test, and other stuff. They are all the same. Okay. So then, if you're going to look at the result, this is how you look at it. So it is the tunable, the regularization parameter alpha. So with respect to this parameter, so I have run a few values over here. Just okay. So this is log space. So what it is trying to do is 10 raised to -3 to 10 raised to 6. So that is what is the alpha is varying. So 10 raised to -3 is point not 1. So that sort of very low value to a very high value of 10 raised to 6. So that is how the alpha is varied, 10 raised to -2 to 10 raised to 6. Okay. So what is 10 raised to -2? So 10 raised to -2 is almost like you are not using any penalty at all. So the weight you are giving to the penalty term is very low. It's almost like your 11th order regression. That's all. But when you say 10 raised to 6, you are giving a lot of weightage to it. So when you give a lot of weightage, what happens is what you are going to see in this diagram. So when the weightage, penalty weightage is less, so you have so many coefficients here. So means it's 11th order polynomial and 81 terms. So okay, it's not 81 terms right now. It is 3 terms because of the PCA. So 11th order polynomial on 3 terms. So many coefficients are there, and then as you start increasing the weight parameter, you see that the slowly. As you start increasing the alpha, so the coefficient weights means each of them represents one coefficient. Okay, so the value of the coefficient of your model. So like this might be alpha naught, alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. I mean, or you can call some other term, because alpha now we are using as regularization, so you could call it as, say, A naught, A1, A2, A3, A4, so on. So that if you look at one color here, so this is, say, one of the coefficients, A0 or something. So as you start increasing the regularization value from right to left, so this value starts to shrink. So this is where also this is popularly known as, these things are popularly known as shrinkage methods. So it is shrinking the value of the coefficient towards zero. Okay, but if you again zoom it here, and if you want to see it here, they not exactly zero, they still have some values, which means all the coefficients which are there, say hundreds of coefficients which might have been there in this problem, so they all stay, but their values get shrunken. Okay, so now you need to see how the training error and test error is performing. So against the same tunable parameter, so this is where it's your without penalty. This is almost, you can assume that this is without penalty, which is the normal multiple linear regression or polynomial regression. This is what you would get as the training error. Okay, but as you start increasing the tunable parameter, you do see the training error increasing. So this is something counterintuitive. So you would expect that the error has to come down, but this is where actually the trick is, because the training error, that is the reason training error is not the right metric to look at, because what the training error sees is, it is seeing the same sort of data which is used to fit the model. So you have more coefficients, or the actually, when you retain highest value of the coefficients, so it will try to overfit. So what it is going to do is, it's going to do like this. Okay, so you saw, see here, when the polynomial degree is high also, when it did in overfitting also, the training error always came down. Okay, that is what you are seeing here. But when you are applying ridge regression, it is against that concept for the training error, and that is the reason the training error starts increasing. Okay, so but you cannot understand, or you cannot say what is happening to the model from this. You have to actually look at the test error. Okay. So if you look at the test error, this is completely the opposite way. So it was high here, and then as you started increasing the weight of your penalty term, the regularization term, your test error has come down. So if you go back here and look at it, so so what has happened? So initially the model is something like this. It's here. It's at this extreme. Okay, the training error is very low, and as you start to increase the penalty term, you saw this training error rising, but you will also see the test error coming down. And this is what you should be more concerned with. You should never look into training error, or I mean, you have to look at training error from a different perspective. And when you have to decide on the model, then you always are more focused on the test error. Okay, so now what has happened, we just chose the 11th order of the model. We didn't worry about anything else. We just used the tunable parameter of the regularization, and from there we were able to identify what is the final tuning value. Okay, so this MSC test has dropped to under 500. And if you want to look at original thing, see, original thing, if you look at it without using regularization, it was in the order of 600. Okay, so then it has come down. If you see the test error, 400 plus something odd, which is there over here. So the same thing has happened here when you look at the test error. So the test error has gone under 500, probably 400 also it is there. At the same level what you saw uh, by doing I mean, without using penalty, but using changing the polynomial order, whatever you saw. So you got that much more efficiently here. Okay, so you're not concerned at all about the 11th degree polynomial term, but the penalty term has automatically given you a sort of bandwidth. So it has given you the right solution. Okay. So that's about ridge regression. So I will also go through lasso and then probably take up questions on this. So as I explained earlier, so lasso term is just uses the modulo term here instead of the square term, which was used in ridge regression. And the idea, what you want to expect from lasso is that, like you saw, these coefficient terms were shrunk, but it never went to exact zero. So you could not throw away the multiple coefficients which were there, which was affecting your sort of interpretability. So, but when you look at lasso, you want to make drive certain values to zero, and so that your model interpretability becomes higher. And the same thing here. So you have the tunable parameter alpha 10 raised to minus 6 to 10 raised to 2. So you are going to do, I mean, this is something you have to work with your data and then try to see what range works for you. Okay, so there are no hard and fast rules, or thumb rules directly which we can tell that you need to choose this penalty value to be so and so or so and so. So this is some exercise that you have to do. This whole machine learning stuff is an iterative process. So it's you have multiple options, but you need to iterate and then find the best, whatever fits your data and your sort of objective. Okay. So we have imported Lasso, which is again available in sklearn, and instead of Ridge, what we called earlier, we are going to call Lasso in its place with the tunable parameter value alpha. Again, we have chosen the highest polynomial degree order, which is 11, and we have a pipeline which works out. And then now you see here how the lasso works, how the coefficients is driven in lasso. So they they are almost like from here itself, many of the coefficients are turned towards zero, and almost with 10 raised to 1 or 100, sorry, this is 10. So at the value of lasso coefficients of 10, so most of the coefficients have gone to zero. So that is how you see the difference between the what ridge regression and lasso is doing. If you look at the training error, again the same trend. So the training error with all the coefficients, it was very good, but then as you start shrinking it, the training error increases. But what we are concerned is the test error, and unfortunately, test error is also behaving the same way. So why is the test error also behaving the same way? So this is an interesting thing. So the thing is that in lasso, since it is exactly driven to zero, so many of the coefficients, since they are exactly driven to zero, so you see one threshold point here, where significant number of values are drawn to zero, but at the end, at the value of greater than 10, many values have been driven to zero. So what happens in lasso is that we sort of start getting a bias error. Okay, so even though there is a good advantage in lasso that the number of coefficients are reduced, but a lasso can cause a bias error, and that is the reason you need to choose here. Now the minimal is something here, so you could choose the tunable value of between 10 raised to minus 3 and 10 raised to minus 1, and that should give you a good range. But if you look at the test error, you see 460, so it's in the same level as the ridge regression. So you get the advantage of the ridge regression with the same sort of test error, and you have thrown out a significant number of coefficients, making your interpretation of the model much better. But you should be careful in choosing the tunable parameter. So tunable parameter does not always arrive at the end. It could also again rise something like this. So this, you could have again a bathtub curve happening here as well. So whichever value, for whichever alpha value for which you see the minimum test error, you freeze that alpha, and you go ahead by building the model with that alpha. Okay, so that gives you sort of an understanding of a progressive understanding from the point of linear regression to the multiple linear regression, polynomial degrees, the variance, the bias problem, the penalty terms. So how different penalties are working, the ridge regression, how is it working, the lasso, how is it working. So the whole idea is you need to keep improving. but the MSEF 460 is still not that good. It's still not that good. So what is the problem here? So the problem here is that the linear regression model itself is insufficient to capture the even though you give polynomial degrees also, it's sort of not capturing the intrinsic nonlinearities which are present in the actual model, the superconductor model that we are treating here. So this calls for more advanced models, or models which are more suitable to this class of problems, and typically they are decision trees. So decision trees, and again within decision trees, so you have the random forest and the boosting methods. So the random forest also will give you fairly good result, and if you go to boosting methods, then XGBoost is the state of the art model. Many Kaggle competitions, which are the world famous competitions on machine learning, which is open to general public. So they are won by using XGBoost. We don't have the bandwidth to cover all those topics in this short FDP, but I'm just giving you overview of where you can go next. So this is where I will leave at this stage for your understanding and for your usage. Okay. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to move to logistic regression. Today I was supposed to cover unsupervised learning. I have even shared the unsupervised learning collab notebooks. So with organizers, I think they would have shared those notebooks with you. So you probably will not be able to touch upon that because the logistic regression we have to cover, and then uh, we, if the time permits, I will take it up, or I would like to take up move to neural networks, so that for the afternoon session on deep learning, so you will need an overview of a neural network, which is again a supervised technique. So that's what we will see. But the next topic I'm going to take up is logistic regression. Before that, any questions? No questions? No, is it all making sense? Whatever I'm going to tell you. So this is actually a very blitzkrieg way of getting into machine learning. You're covering the sort of very essential elements of machine learning through practical examples. The mathematics are always there. The mathematics are interesting. They are deep, but yeah, the context of or where the setting of the mathematics, how is it really useful? So if you understand that context, you'll be better able to appreciate and then grasp the mathematical concepts also. I want to leave 5 minutes out if somebody wants to run this code. They want to try something running on their system, and if there are any issues for them to run it, I can answer it. So I will leave 5 minutes for that.
Okay, sir.
I think we can start. But if somebody has some questions, they can ask now. Nothing is there, we will move on.
Just move on, sir. Any participants, if you have any doubt while running this particular code, you can ask, sir. If not, we'll move on. Okay, sir. You can move on, sir.
Okay. So we'll go to logistic regression. So what is the difference between linear regression and logistic regression? Anybody in the class who are already aware about it? I want at least a bit of interactivity. Otherwise, I'm not sure. I mean, how much is being understood, and then anybody, any idea the difference between linear and logistic regression? Are there any comments? So coordinators, you may.
In logistic regression, dependent variable will be in binary in nature, sir.
Yeah, that's true. So basically, linear regression is numeric values. So you're predicting the sort of quantitative values. In logistic regression, or primary logistic regression is a part of classification methodology. And in classification, you are actually trying to predict a qualitative variable, so a class variable. And particularly within that, the logistic regression is one of the simplest classification algorithms, which is primarily built for binary classification, as you pointed out. So thank you. So that is
Logistic regression uses sigmoid as its activation function. Can be used for classification as well.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, the key to logistic regression as compared to the linear regression is the sigmoid function. We want to talk about that here. I'm just again taking one of the examples which I have worked on. So, but anyway, in the course Colab notebooks, you'll be looking at an example which is relevant in the electronics field. Okay, so here we just had some experiments conducted on CNC machines, and then there are some certain X values. What is the material, feed rate, and other stuff. So we don't have to worry about. There are some X variables and there is some Y. So in the Y in this context is not a number. Okay, so they are just two classes, binary classes. Is as the tool the worn or it is not worn. So they have done this experiment. They have recorded all the X variables. They have recorded the Y variables, and Y variables are classes. Okay. So now, what is the model, and how we can build the model to predict this sort of classification problem. So suppose you were to use, means linear regression is historically the first method that was developed. And suppose you just had that, and then can you predict the classes from linear regression? So that's the question. So we are again talking about single feature variable. So single feature variable, just for an example, even though here there are few more of them. Suppose you only had one X variable and you want to predict two classes. One is 0 and unknown is 1. So the idea is, again, you have to give some number to it. So binary classification. So you need to, one you make it as 0, another you make it as 1. Okay. And then you have examples. No, you had known, unknown, and other stuff. So for the value of certain X, so suppose you are only looking at one value feed rate over here, and you say for this feed rate, now my classification is 0, 0, 0. You are putting it here, and as per my experiment, for unknown, for this feed rate or feature variable, I have x, x, x. So this is my unknown state. Okay, and then if you are going to fit a linear regression model to it. So how that linear line or the fit is going to go? So because it's going to adjust in such a way that the least square error is minimized. So it might go like this. That line could go like this. And if the line is drawn like this, can you do a classification from this sort of a linear regression itself? Probably yes. So suppose you say a 0.5, you could say this is 0% probability, this is 100% probability, and this is 50% probability. So 0.5 value, and you draw a line, horizontal line here, which meets the linear regression line, the fit line that you have put here. And then you say whatever values which are, so this line is there, whatever is to uh, below this 0.5 is one class, and whatever value you get above 0.5 is 1. So what is happening here, say if you extend this line, so probably what it is doing is that this value it is predicting as, or it is fitting here, this value is this, corresponds to this value corresponds to this. Similarly, this value corresponds to a point here, this here, and so on. Okay, so now when you do this 50% probability point, when you take, and then you are sort of predicting the values only on this line. So then you say this is a cutoff point, anything below it is unknown, anything above it is known. Probably it is doing its job. So now you just look at it. So it has actually classified, this simple linear regression itself has classified the known and unknown classes altogether. It's too simplistic. It has done its job, but what's the problem? So the problem comes when the spread of the variables is much more broader than what is seen here. Suppose in all these unknown states, instead of being clustered around here, if their values are quite spread out, and now you want to fit a linear regression, the line is not going to go like this. It's more likely to go like this. Okay, and then if you have 50% point, and then say anything lesser than 50% is one class, and anything above 50% is one class, you are misclassifying this portion here. So these two readings, these two values are misclassified as 0, while other things still get into 1. So that is the reason linear regression is too simplistic and cannot be used to do a classification task. And this is where the sigmoid function comes into picture, and that is the use of the sigmoid function. Okay, so you have from linear regression this alpha, which is coefficients, and then x. So you and linear regression model is simply this: f of x is equal to alpha transpose x. In logistic regression, you sort of apply a sigmoid, a sort of activation function, a sort of transformation on this alpha transpose x. So now if you call alpha transpose x as something as R, then you apply a sort of activation function G on alpha transpose x, or G of R, such that that is equal to 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus R. So f of x is equal to 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus alpha transpose x. So that is the logistic regression transformation or logistic regression model. Okay, so here the function which relates 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus R is sigmoid function, which is this curve, whatever you are seeing this curve. So this is the sigmoid function. So again, if you're looking at a single variable over here, so and alpha transpose x, if you are going to plot, which is we have called it as R, we are going to plot it on this x-axis. Okay, so then the value, the y, the prediction that we are doing, f of x, is nothing but 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus alpha transpose x. So that this value which is on the sigmoid curve is our prediction. Okay, the prediction, instead of going on a line, it goes on this sigmoid curve. And now you look at the same classes. Okay, 0 classes and x classes. You have a fairly good spread of x over here, but still you use the same threshold value, 0.5. So you use a 0.5 threshold value. Anything above 0.5, you're going to class as unknown, and anything below 0.5 is known. And now, even though there is a good spread, it's able to capture, it's able to classify all the unknowns as unknown and all the knowns as known. Okay, so that is how it is working. Primarily, what happens is that the decision boundary, in the case of this simple problem, this is a decision point. 0 happens when alpha transpose x is equal to 0. So essentially, when alpha transpose x is less than 0, you are going to class it as 0, 0th class or known class, and when alpha transpose x is greater than 0, you are going to class it as another class, which is an unknown class. Okay, so that's how the sigmoid activation function gives you a better capability to do a classification task. Then what happens if there are multiple features? We were just looking at single features. So in a single feature, the decision boundary is nothing but a point. But when you have two features, the decision boundary is a line. So what the logistic regression or the sigmoid function is going to do is it's going to create a sort of line. So in a linear regression, you are fitting a line. In a classification or logistic regression problem, you are not fitting a line, but you are fitting a decision boundary. And you are telling, this is my boundary. On one side of my boundary is one class, and on the other side of my boundary is another class. So this is a boundary line, and you're telling on one side of this line is my one particular class, 0 class, and then another side of this my line is my one class. So that is how it works out. And what happens to the R, alpha transpose X? So now alpha transpose X in a two variable problem, two X variables, two features is a plane. So now R was a point here in a single variable, and R becomes a plane, and the decision boundary becomes a line in the context of two features. And it's not that easy. So this is a linear decision boundary because it is a line. What happens if the problem is more complex? You see all the green zeros over here, and x's are lying outside it. If you're going to draw a line in any way, you try to draw a line, you cannot classify these zeros and x's. Okay, so because the problem is nonlinear. So for a nonlinear problem, you need to construct a nonlinear decision boundary. So you cannot have a line, and that is where you go into what we talked about, polynomial regression in the context of the regression. So we are going to call in the higher order terms, x1 square, x2 square, x1, x2, and so on, for this alpha transpose x. Okay, we are still, the only thing is, see, when you look at alpha transpose x, they are just like linear regression. What we are doing in logistic regression is just applying this transformation to it. 1 over 1 plus e raised to minus r, and all r is alpha transpose x, which is like a linear regression problem. So alpha transpose x, so where x's are with powers of 1, it's a linear regression, and where the x's have higher powers is a polynomial regression, and where x is 1, you can only get a linear fit, and that is equivalent to a linear decision boundary in logistic regression. And then when x's are higher order, you get a polynomial fit in the linear regression problem, and you get a nonlinear decision boundary in logistic regression. So that's sort of how you can compare, how you can say differentiate between linear regression and logistic regression, and how you can you're sort of extending the linear regression problem to the classification problem. So, and in the classification problem, it is always a probability. So it is, what is the probability that this belongs, so less than 50% or greater than 50%? That's the probability you are talking about. And then you are classifying them as the two classes. This is primarily the logistic regression can be used for that, even though there are extensions of logistic regression where you can do multiple class classification also. will not be bothered about it. It's important that you understand these concepts, because if you want to get into neural networks, deep learning, and other stuff, this is the basis. Neural networks also, the fundamental concept is in the logistic regression only. Its fundamental concept starts from sigmoid functions only. So it, it is good that you're able to, if it will be good if you can appreciate this and understand this concept. So, I mean, before going further, I'll just leave 2 minutes for you to understand, grasp it, and then have any doubts you can ask me. So it's all mathematical. So we are talking about matrix manipulations. We are talking about some sort of probability, so 50%. So it's the linear algebra things that you learn, the statistics things that you are learning. So we are just applying them. So applying them to the problems of regression, classification, and so on. And that also to a higher level, we are bringing like superconductor experiment you did, and the fuzzy logistic regression we want to take another example, a radar example we want to take. So it's sort of from the mathematics you are building algorithms, and from the algorithms you are connecting them into real world problems. So this is how you are sort of applying your mathematical fundamentals to a real world scenario. Again, no questions? Is it clear or it is not clear? And I don't expect that it to be understood perfectly. It's too short a time to go far deeper and then explain. But also, it's not that difficult. Today, these things are being taught to high school students. Machine learning has become a sort of, I don't know, it's too basic. So there are a good number of companies who are marketing these stuff itself. So at our level, this should not be difficult at all. And today, machine learning is taught more from the code first perspectives. They are telling you start with the code, you start with an application, start with an example, then go to its understanding, then go to its mathematics. There is another trend that is catching up in that context. You don't have to know all the mathematics for you to use, for you to work on it or use it. Okay, no questions, then I carry on. And I again just leave 2-3 minutes for you to process. I don't want to jump too quickly. Shall I go ahead now?
Yes, sir.
So, so now we come to the same concepts here. So we just improved our linear regression model with an activation function, and that is a sigmoid activation function. And we said that what is the difference between linear regression and logistic regression? It is in terms of there the actual fit, and here it is in terms of decision boundaries. So now in the cost function, so the next step in anything is to find the cost function, because again we have to find the same coefficients here, and for that we have to use a gradient descent, and for the gradient descent we first have to identify the cost function, and the cost function is not the same. So there's a difference between linear regression and logistic regression. So the cost function is slightly going to be different, and here comes the log terms here, y log fx plus 1 minus y log of 1 minus fx. And if you do correct transformations of these things, so you will sort of end up into some sort of log formula, and that is where the term logistic regression actually comes from. Okay, so you need to remember this formula for the cost function, which is different from the linear regression. But gradient descent, again, it's the same, nothing changes. You have the learning rate lambda, and then you have the partial derivative of the cost function with respect to each of your coefficients, and you are updating it each time until the k is minimized. That is what you're going to do. So you fit a model, then f of x is going to be calculated as a sigmoid activation applied on, or transformation applied on top of your alpha transpose x. So there's a cost function, and then you do gradient descent, find the coefficient value which minimizes the cost, and that's your final model that you're going to get for that. And what again is going to change is the error metrics. So error metrics will be different to classification problem and compared to a regression problem. Here, what we are going to tell is that what is an actual class from experiment or from real data. We know what is it. So known or unknown, we call it as P, positive and negative. And your prediction, you are doing a prediction from your logistic regression. Again, known and unknown, this positive and negative. When actual class, your data is P, and you also predicted P, which means your P in the sense that it is 0, and you also predicted 0. It is okay, whatever is 0. Maybe P you can call it as 1, N as 0. So then 1 versus 1, so P versus P. These are known as what is known as true positives. Okay, and then if you have 1, but you predicted wrongly as 0, then it is a false negative. If the class was n or 0 and you predicted as p, then it's a false positive. And if it was 0 and you also predicted 0, it is a true negative. And what is your metric? The true positive and true negative, which falls on the diagonal of this matrix, is very important. So they refer to your accuracy. And whatever is off diagonal, so they are your inaccurate predictions of the classes. So that is why this sort of matrix is known as confusion matrix. And from the confusion matrix, so confusion matrix is not a number. So you just put these numbers over here, but then what is a metric? You want to derive a metric out of it. And that metric is accuracy, which uses the confusion matrix to arrive at a accuracy metric. So the accuracy is the one that is most prominently used. Again, there are many other methods which are there. So in the context of very quick introduction, so I'm not bringing in too many terms, too many methods here. I'm just giving few relevant methods. That is the reason I'm only focusing on accuracy here. So accuracy is can be arrived at from the confusion matrix with this formula, with the numerator of true positive and true negative. So whatever was true versus overall prediction. So what is the overall number of predictions? Or this TP plus TN plus FP plus FN is the total number of experiments that you did, or the total set of data that you are having. So what was the true as against the total? So that fraction is accuracy. That can also be written as TP plus TN over P plus N. Okay, so P is basically TP plus FP, and N is TN plus FN. So this is how you can put it in the accuracy as a metric for your classification. Okay, so multi-class classification, again, there are logistic regression itself can be improved, but there are other methods. So SVM is one of the most standard method support vector machines to do multi-class classifications, and of course decision trees, neural networks. You can use all of them to do multi-class classifications. Now we will go to the problem of logistic regression. You will have the logistic regression folder, and you should see these two files over here with a data file, which is ionosphere data. Okay, so you can open the first one. So logistic regression underscore ionosphere. This is an experiment conducted by Johns Hopkins University, and it is a space physics group within that, and this data is made public. So you can, I think, go through this sort of the background history from where this data came. Just give me a minute. So the radar data, I mean, there was radar has been used, actual radar in the field, and they what they have done is that so the system of phased arrays, phased array antennas, and so they targeted ionosphere, and they wanted to classify them as good radar return, showing evidence of some type of structure in the ionosphere, and bad return when the signal just passed through the ionosphere without coming back. So any radar signal which hit the ionosphere and came back, they were classified as good, and the signals that were completely lost through the ionosphere, they were classified as a bad radar return. Okay, so the question, the thing is that they did sort of experiments over there with by varying a lot of variables. So they particularly had some 35 variables or attributes, and then against that they were trying to classify good versus bad radar returns. Okay, so this is an actual experiment done, and this data was logged, and this data is made public, and it's a typical sort of a benchmark study for classification. So further details are here, so you can use that to look at the details of the experiment that is done. But we will use this data to do the logistic regression based classification problems of good radar return versus bad radar return in an ionosphere experiment. So we have the data here. I showed you that this data is there, ionosphere data. And we will again, using the pandas, we will read that the CSV file, and like I explained yesterday, you have to go here, you have to I mean, basically first you have to mount your Google Drive, and then you have to go to the particular CSV file, copy the path, and then paste it here. This won't work for you, so you have to change your path based on what you're going to get from this particular folder structure. Okay. And before that, I have imported some things. So again, NumPy, pandas, and other stuff. But again, in the sklearn linear model, so yesterday we saw the linear regression. So today we will see the logistic regression. So we are going to import this function called logistic regression. And in the metrics, yesterday we got MSE, mean square error, and mean absolute error. So here from the metrics class, we will import accuracy score, for our metrics. The pre-processing and other things remain the same. And once we read the data, we can the data frame, we can display it. So you have this something called, they are labeled as columns. So there are column A, B, C, D, and so on. So I think you can see here there are 351 rows and 35 columns. So there are 350 radar experiments that were done, and 35 column, and the last column is G and B, which means good radar return versus bad radar return. So that is what is there. That is your what you want to classify. That is your Y variable, and all the other things are X variables. But interesting to know, this all the X variables are also sort of class variables, true or false. They are not numbers. So this is a special way to address these things. So until now in linear regression, you saw the problems where everything, all the X variables were numeric. But here you have some X variables which are non-numeric, and there should be a way to address them as well. We will talk about it. Then the data frame info. So you can ask for info. So if you ask for .info, which is the pandas function, you can see that what is the data type of each class, and how many sort of counts are there, how many values are there in that particular column. So you have a column, you have 51 values, and it's a Boolean type. So the first two variables are Boolean type, and then other things are float variables, and the last one is an object variable. Uh, so now the important thing is we need to transform this the Boolean variables into some other form for us to use in logistic regression, and that is known as encodings. So we have two sort of encodings. Even the good and bad, whatever two classes are there, we can't use it straight away. It doesn't make sense to use G or B as good and bad. So we have to sort of convert it to a numeric value. So whatever numeric value conversions we are going to do, they are known as encodings. When you do it on the target variable or Y variable or the predicted variable, it's known as the label encoding, because it is a label, good and bad label. So that is what is known as the label encoding. And when you have X's which are non-numeric, then you are going to call it as they are actually the features, and they are known as ordinal encoding. There are two methods for features. One is known as ordinal encoding, and another is known as one hot encoding. Okay, so uh, we are going to use uh, so the label encoding. What does label encoding do? So label encoding, already you have defined functions through the task automatically. Otherwise, you would have to say all G's as 1, all B's as 1. I mean, all B's as 0, all G's as 1. And you have to change that manually and then make that 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, and so on in this final column. So instead of doing that, when you use the label encoder function within scikit-learn is going to do it automatically for you. Okay, so so this is how you define a label encoding, and you are going to use that label encoding on a particular column, which is the last column here. And when you apply the transformation, automatically the G's and B's are going to get converted into zeros and ones. Okay, and then you want to see by calling the unique function. So you can call what are the unique values that you have encoded. So it has encoded two unique values. One, it is 1 and 0. So because there are only two classes here, G and B, it has converted them, one of them into 1, another into 0. Okay, so that is how the target has been encoded, which is known as the label encoding. And in the ordinal encoding, so what is going to do is that suppose you have A, B, and C, it will say A is 1, B is 2, and C is 3. So that is how it will start giving a number and incrementing that number for each different value. But here in our case, we just had zeros and ones. So it is again going to say true as 1 and false as 0, and that is how it will do an ordinal encoding. There is another one is one-hot encoding. one hot encoding is another context which is there. So suppose you don't want to say, suppose there is green, blue, and red, and now you say green is 1, blue is 2, and red is 3. So this is ordinal encoding. Okay. But if you are going to do this sort of a thing, you are telling red is more important than green because red is 3 and green is 1. So this gives a different sort of sense to the algorithm which is working on it, in order to avoid that confusion where actually you cannot make a hierarchy of your variables like green, blue, and red. You sort of say you use one hot encoding. In the one hot encoding, what happens is green is 1. If some value is green, then it says 1, 0, 0. Means it is not blue, it is not red, but it is 1. Then when if it wants to get red, then it says 0, 0, 1. So it does not encode with a single number, but it is bifurcated into 3 different variables. Means if you just had one column, whether with it was green, blue, or red, this one column is split into 3 columns, and then whichever value corresponded to green, it says 1, then it says 0 for blue, 0 for red. Okay, so similarly it will do for red. When it comes to blue, it highlights it as 1 and others as 0, and when it comes to red, it highlights it as 1 and others as 0. That is one hot encoding. But in this context, we don't have to worry too much. We will just use the typical ordinal encoding, which just classifies it as 0 and 1. There are two sort of contexts here. We're going to use them. So once you have done that, done the transformation, so even ordinal encoding, and you have done the fit transform, you can see now whatever was here true and false have been converted into 0 and 1. And now if you ask for the data frame info, so you see that instead of bool, everything is a floating point, and the final one is an integer. So which was earlier an object, so now we did a target encoding, which is a label encoding, and then this is our target variable. Instead of an object, it has now become an integer variable, which is either 0 or 1. So 0 for bad, 1 for good, and so on. Okay, so that is how you do a transformation of your data. So this is important. This is the pre-processing of your data before you can apply it to the logistic. You can apply logistic regression on it. So then there are some other things like you want to know whether all columns, whether some columns are varying at all or not. If you see some of the numbers, they may not even vary. So if they are not varying, how are they contributing to the prediction of the good and bad? So that is what is being assessed here. We will not focus too much on it. So they are at an advanced level. The pre-processing itself is a very big topic. So hardly the model becomes important, because you can just go on using linear regression, or say in the classification, logistic regression, SVM, decision trees, XGBoost, random forest. So that's what people typically tend to do. They don't care. I mean, they just randomly apply all sort of models that comes into the picture, and then they pick the best out of it. But then what really becomes a differentiator is how you're going to pre-process the data. So that actually gives a differentiation between a good model and good prediction versus a bad model and a bad prediction. Okay, so this pre-processing of the data, so again you have to do, so you have to remove y's and x, you have to separate it. So another way of separating here is pop method in the data frame. So when you say pop, it just removes the last column and then gives you that value into y. And what you're going to do also is that, because you did some variance testing here and you found that column B has no much significance here, it's not varying much, so you can just throw that column also out. So that is where the x we are telling df to drop. So we are dropping the column from the list of x's. Okay, so that's what we are doing. So when we say df.pop, already whatever the last column was there, it has gone out, and you can just, if you want to retain everything, then that df itself will become your x variable. But on top of it, you want to remove one more column, and that is why we are using df.drop. So I hope this is clear. Then, so pre-processing, all the stuff of pre-processing is done. So we can move on from pre-processing to the fitting, and the logistic regression is a function that we defined earlier. So we can just use that and say dot fit your X matrix and use sort of Y column. And from the fit, the next step is prediction. So see, we stored that logistic regression in a variable called CLF, and we say CLF.predict on the X variables. So again, we are doing what is the prediction. This is a training prediction. So what we actually get from the error matrix is a training error, because we have not bifurcated the training and test set. So this simply is a training error that we will get, and we want to see what is that error. We are going to do error matrix. So when we have this SQL matrix, we can import confusion matrix that we talked earlier. And confusion, we call it confusion matrix with Y, which is our actual data versus Y pred from our logistic regression model. And that should give you a confusion matrix, and this is a confusion matrix. And the nomenclature is slightly reversed here in the sklearn implementation. So you have true negatives, true positives, and then on the diagonal Fn and Fp. So higher the diagonal value, higher this value, better is your accuracy. So, but any things coming off diagonal, non-zero, so this sort of reduces your accuracy. Okay, so this was a class N is bad return of the radar was actual class, and the predictor class was also N. So true, negative. So it predicted the bad radar return as bad radar return for 101 times, and then the good radar return was good radar return predict 219 times correctly. But what was a good radar return, it predicted as a bad radar return for 6 times, which is a misclassification. And what was a bad radar return, it classified as a good radar return 25 times, which is a misclassification error. So 25 and 6 together are a misclassification error and misclassifications, and these are the right classifications. And from there you can actually get the TN, FPF, and TP, true, negative, true, false, positive, directly from the confusion matrix by using the dot travel method. So you get it in terms of a tuple. So this is a tuple. This is in Python. Already somebody knows. So this is a tuple, and so these are clubbed in a tuple. And then what we can say is CLF.score, because the score method has the accuracy score in it. So you can directly call either you can get this thing and do your calculation from the formula that already it was shown here. This formula, you can use it and then code it, or you can directly call a function called score and give your X and Y, and then it's going to give you the score. So your prediction accuracy was 91%. And this is a training prediction accuracy, not a test. So this is a training prediction accuracy. Of 91% you got. So you did an experiment and you are able to tell that given certain features of the radar, how we are going to tune the radar. You need to look at that in detail. What are all the different things that they did in this radar experiment. So in each column A, B, and will correspond to parameters of the settings in which the radar was activated. So you would know that. So I mean, these are costly things. So you are doing practically on large antennas, and then you cannot indefinitely keep on doing the experiments. So suppose you're going to get a set of measurements tomorrow, and you don't want to do the experiment, and you want to still say predict whether it something related to ionosphere. So you can just use your model, which sort of has got a training accuracy of 91%, and then be able to predict whatever you want without actually doing an experiment. So this is where the true application of machine learning comes. So machine learning is two portions. One is the portion where you build the model, and second is the portion where you apply the model onto your problem. So when you apply the model, so you detach from the data, you detach from the experiments, and you just use it. And this is where gives you both the speed, it saves you the time, it saves you the money. That's what machine learning models truly are benefit. That is where the benefit of machine learning comes into picture. Okay. So of course, in the context of Google's, Amazon's, and all that stuff, Netflixes and other stuff, so you can much more easily grasp what are the benefits that are there. So based on user behavior, if in Amazon you're going to go and then you are purchasing online, and a sort of history gets created as to what you're more likely to purchase, what you're not interested in. So next time it goes, the Amazon is going to recommend you that you might like this probably. So how is it going to do? How is it actually doing that recommendation? So it's using machine learning models based on the data, based on the whatever purchases you did, whatever locking you did, whatever things you viewed, even without purchase, it's storing all the data, and based on that, it is giving you a recommendation the next time you go to the website. So you're watching a movie on Netflix. Yeah, so there's a genre, an action genre. There is a genre of what the history and all that stuff. So whatever genres are there you're watching, so you typically orient yourself to a particular language, particular genre, and then this is what the Netflix is going to understand. And then the next time you want to go on Netflix, so it's probably going to pop up things which are more likely that you have already seen, which is similar to them. So these are the stuff that machine learning is actually used. I mean, this is where the sort of consumer-oriented machine learning this application happens. So I'm just giving here more engineering sense of the application for machine learning. So machine learning is useful across the spectrums, whether it is typical consumer sense or in the engineering sense. So we being all engineers, so there is enough that we can leverage from machine learning in any of our domains. So irrespective of our branch. Okay, so that's the thing. And there is something called balanced data set. So those are a bit advanced topics, so I don't want to treat it much over here. So with that, I leave this thing on logistic regression. I was supposed to cover unsupervised learning, which we couldn't do with this short time, but the codes are shared, the notebooks are shared. You can go through them, and I have also seen that I think tomorrow's session there is somebody going to talk about the clustering. So I have given an example of a clustering problem also. Again, I think taking one of these examples, either the radar problem or the superconductor problem. So with one of them, I have shown the clustering and anomaly detection problems. So you may go through it. I mean, once the theoretical session on clustering is taken. So I won't be covering the unsupervised techniques now. So in the afternoon session, we will straight away get into neural networks, and then if time permits, we will see how far we can go into deep learning in the 1.5 hours slot that we have got. So I'll leave it, and thank you. And any questions now? I'm open to questions.
Participants, if you have any question, you can ask to sir.
I hope this example is relevant to your domain. So many of you would be working on this communications and radars and all this stuff. This is how sort of practical use you make of the machine learning in your domain. Why today participants are pretty silent? So,
Everyone is texting sir that it was good. Thank you, sir.
okay. Fine, no problem. So then I think we'll close the session now and then.
Okay, sir. So we'll join at 3 o'clock, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.